Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Ryan Dice, and Roland Frazier. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 28 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you can check out the book that I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Vance Lee. Vance is a brand and marketing strategist turned e-com entrepreneur. He's got a background of 15 years in marketing and 11 years in e-com, and he began Amazon FBA way back in 2015. But since then, he's mastered crowdfunding, launch products and grow brands. He's raised over $7 million in successful launches. He's broken records with two of his launches, both #1 funded in their niche and ranked in the top 1% of crowdfunding projects of all time. He's originally from Canada, and now he's a full-time nomad traveling and living in different countries around the world. It's really my pleasure to welcome here today, Vance Lee. Welcome, Vance.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. So yeah, let's talk about crowdfunding. Such a great topic. So like what are the reasons why an entrepreneur that's launching a product should consider having crowdfunding be part of that journey?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why I think somebody that's considering launching a product would consider crowdfunding. And I think the first thing I would mention is that crowdfunding is not a new idea. This has been around for many, 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 many years. And most recently, it's been popular through websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and those types of more consumer-facing ones. But to crowdfund a project idea or to crowdfund a concept is definitely not new. It's getting people to support your idea and be able to take that idea and launch it when you don't have the initial funds yourself. So that's kind of the original premise of crowdfunding, and it's been around for probably hundreds or thousands of years. This type of concept of getting a lot of people to pitch in a little bit to support your product launch idea. So when it comes to fast forward to modern day, in the past couple of years, people have been using this to launch product ideas for a few main reasons. And I think one of the biggest reasons is, I think there's two categories of the main reasons. And the first one is financial. So if you don't have the funds that you need to be able to launch your project, or you don't want to be extremely risky with your launch by investing in a lot of things like inventory first, which is necessary for launches on, say, for example, Amazon and Shopify, then going through the process of crowdfunding allows you to actually put out the campaign for the project you want to launch and not have to order the inventory in advance. So this is really, it allows you to essentially get pre-orders for your product and show that the people in the market want your product before you actually go about and put in tens of thousands, maybe even $100,000 on your first inventory order. So that's really, for a lot of people that we work with, that's one of the reasons why they want to pursue crowdfunding, is just the financial aspect of not having to risk your money on inventory, but also to get the cash and the pre-orders in advance.
And it also sounds like credibility too. It's like if you show that there's a lot of interest, that can help you with getting backers or getting interest from retailers or things of that nature.
Definitely, yeah. So you're way ahead. So really, the idea here also, on top of the financial aspect, is if you have a successful crowdfunding campaign, then you essentially build a lot of public credibility. So I mean, for people that launch products on Amazon, for example, even if they have like a bestseller or like top ranking product, they rarely have credibility outside of Amazon. So they might have a solid product, maybe a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 reviews, but people don't feel like they're looking at a credible business anywhere outside. But with launching a product, a campaign on a website like Kickstarter, you essentially develop a lot of credibility with that's public. So your campaign is going to be showing that, hey, these guys raised 50, maybe $200,000, whatever it might be publicly. So when people search your name, really, actually, the other cool thing about Kickstarter is they have really amazing SEO. So when you search your name or your product on Google, usually if you've had a successful campaign, you show up within the top 5 of Kickstarter, like top 5 of Google, just to have your product page, just your Kickstarter campaign page show up on the top of Google. So when people are researching you, exactly like you said, it shows credibility. It shows that other people also think that you have a good product or a good brand. So that's really awesome. That's really awesome benefit of being able to have a successful campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, touching on the SEO thing that you mentioned there, I'm curious. This is a little bit aside, but when you create your campaign on let's say Kickstarter, and like you have links to your website, right? Does Kickstarter carry some link authority that like is beneficial to you, to your own SEO when they prominently feature you?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't know the answer to that question.
But it's an interesting question, right? It's just like mentioning the SEO and how good they are at getting to the top of search, search ranking for the actual Kickstarter pages. And I'm just curious if it carries authority. Maybe a question for another day, but but I'm curious if you get that benefit too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, actually. And on top of that, I mean, not only just Kickstarter, but if you have a successful campaign in a niche that people are really excited about, you often, like with my projects, we have a lot of blogs or publications that just pick up the story and say, hey, look at these guys. My recent project was in the coffee niche. Look at these guys that launched a school coffee product, write an article about it. So you begin getting really like lots of credibility across multiple platforms and different types of publications and things like that as well. So that's on top of the Kickstarter SEO.
So it's almost like a bit like a press release where you put it on their platform, and then there are other people that are watching that platform and pick up the story essentially of the product that you're launching.
Exactly, yeah. And you'll find lots of different types of sites will feature it, but you'll generally find that people that are like in a niche category that's interested in, say, like coffee, for example, those guys will want to feature it on their site and talk about that product, and that gives you credibility within that niche that you're launching in. So that's actually a really cool benefit as well.
And so then we've got the financial reasons in terms of people needing additional capital to help do the launch itself or to grow their business. We've also got the credibility that comes with it, and there's also the validation that you mentioned. It's kind of like before making those orders, getting to see that people are interested in what you're doing. So kind of what other reasons are there that people do a Kickstarter or do a crowdfunding campaign?
So validation is huge. So I think you touched on this, which is really important. Well, it's kind of tied with the financial aspect if you think about it. So instead of actually putting out, whatever it is for your first initial production run, you want to get validation to show that people want this first. So not only do you get validation in terms of saying, okay, well, people actually want this because they're putting money down for it. You might actually in this process get feedback for the product as well. So people might be giving you, hey, we really like this part of the product. We really don't like this, or maybe this isn't as important to us when it comes to the product itself, or maybe you get feedback on the marketing or like the way that you put up, like you presented certain aspects of the actual product that you think is really significant, and maybe you get feedback that, hey, maybe that's not the most important feature, so that eventually when you go to actually like roll this out after Kickstarter, and I should mention here that some people get a little bit confused with Kickstarter. They think that this is like an equivalent to an Amazon, or it's like Kickstarter or Amazon type of thing, and that's definitely not the case, because Kickstarter is more just a launch platform. So you use this to launch, and then after you launch, you can move this to Amazon, you can move this to Shopify, you might be able to, like you mentioned earlier, get into like retail or different types of channels as well. But the idea here is that you're going to be doing something else after Kickstarter. So getting feedback like, people saying, hey, I really like these photos, or I really like this tagline, or I really didn't like this, or this wasn't really clear, is going to be super helpful for you when you transition into starting to market this in different types of well,
why don't you make one in blue? Like, hey, that's cool, but why don't you make one in blue?
Exactly. Yeah. So where's the blue, or where's the black one, or where's the slightly larger version of it? I'd love to see that type of thing, and that
the bedazzled version.
Exactly. Yeah.
something that I've seen people do that don't necessarily need the money for the launch. They have plans to launch it through other channels, but they use Kickstarter as part of their marketing, I guess, as a way to get exposure for the other things that they're doing. So let me say more about that approach, like when people just really use it for marketing purposes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So there's a lot of people that go through this approach even when they don't need the money. And like you said, they're doing this to be able to kind of get in front of the right audience to start building credibility. And we talked about a few of those things earlier, which is to be able to get publicity and exposure on the platform itself, but also getting PR and people picking it up and saying, hey, this is a really cool product in the dog niche or the planted and outdoors niche or whatever it might be. So you start building up credibility that way. But the other thing that's kind of associated with getting credibility is to start building a community. And this is something that's really it's not really like a focus for a lot of e-commerce sellers and Amazon sellers or even people on Shopify. The idea is to be able to use this launch as a way to build an audience that really, really are fans about your category or your product. And to be able to have something like that really allows you to do well with your brand later on past the launch. So it's not only just about the launch, but if you build an audience of people that are extremely excited about what you do and support your product and feel like they got into supporting you at the ground level, then that's gonna yield a lot of dividends when you launch the next product and the next product or the next accessory or version 2 of the same product, whatever it might be. There's a lot of cool stuff that can happen when you start building an audience of people that really care about what you're doing as a brand, rather than just somebody who transactionally brought your product off of Amazon and now they don't even know who you are. They just got the product and maybe an Xbox or something like that. But that's really where it ends. But when you build a community, that's where you start being able to create some momentum with your brand. And that's what we're really looking for nowadays, especially with lots of competition. And really the idea is how can we build some momentum for our business and our brand? And this is, like you said, one of the best ways to do that is to be able to start building that credibility, building an audience of people that actually really care about what you do. And I think that's also another reason why people really like crowdfunding.
Absolutely. And so it's one thing to build an audience, and building an audience is great, but actually building a group of people that are like rooting for you, like they want to see you succeed, is, that's an intangible value that could be just tremendous for your product, for your brand, is having a bunch of people that are kind of like you say, have that feeling. I get in on this at an early stage, and they're really rooting for your success. So I think that's a awesome thing that's possible there. I want to ask you about something.
And like
else.
You said, it's an intangible. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. It really is. And I want to ask you about something else. I want to ask you about like product piracy and such on Kickstarter. So, I mean, a lot of times there are people that troll Kickstarter looking for good ideas to then knock off. I mean, I'm curious. And look, as an IP attorney, I don't want to like fan the flames of like fear and like say like, well, you've got to protect yourself. But I'm just curious to some of your experience with that and what you've seen.
Yeah, so I mean, we've definitely seen examples of really, really, really big projects that have been pirated, and like successful projects that have been pirated. I mean, we're talking about like projects that have raised like $5 million type of thing. But I mean, the risk of having this happen on Kickstarter is generally not necessarily very different than the risk of just putting this out and launching a successful product on Amazon or just on Shopify. The idea is if you're putting something out there and it's producing results, somebody out there who's opportunistic might be able to find that. And I think it's not, this is not necessarily a Kickstarter issue. It's more of like, how are you going to protect yourself otherwise? And I think you might know a little bit more about this that you probably shared with your audience before. But in general, this is not a Kickstarter issue. This is like, how can you protect yourself in general when you're releasing a product, or when you're, what is it that you want to do to make sure that you're protected when you're putting something out there in the open?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Let me just take a 2-minute diversion over to that topic. Just a little public service here about that. So, and first of all, again, like as an IP attorney, you'd expect me to say like, well, you've got to protect yourself, and you'd be a fool not to. But I recognize that every entrepreneur has limited resources, and it's a matter of spending your money appropriately on the things that you need to. Like if you spend lots of money on a patent, you might not have the money to launch your product. And so there's a balance there. And like, it's a risk reward type consideration. So a couple of principles here. First of all, it's like, if you put a product out there, let's say on Kickstarter or out there in public, you're not protected. And as a matter of fact, if a year goes by from the time you publicly disclosed it, but from the time that you actually showed it in public, it's too late to ever patent it. It's too late to ever apply for a patent. So that's something that I think everyone should know, because if just too many people come to me 2 years into the process and say, I've got this product, it's doing fantastic, we've got to protect it. It's like, well, when did you first make it public? In 2019. Well, it's too late. There's nothing we can do. So have that in mind. Is really the ideal time to apply for a patent is before you make it public at all. And though weigh against that the fact that not everyone's got the money to spend on protection. And so you just might need to risk it and get it out there. And you just recognize that that's what you're giving up, is that you might not you might not end up being able to protect it. But there's another principle that factors heavily into this. And I just love to encourage entrepreneurs to not be scarce about their ideas. See, one of the reasons why people often get so afraid and hire me to do a patent is because they're thinking, I've got this idea, and if something happened to this idea, if something went wrong and someone ripped it off, I don't know if I'll ever have an idea this good again. And that's scarcity. That's a feeling like, well, there's, ideas are scarce. There's not enough. Chances are, if you have a good idea, you'll have another good idea and then another good idea. So if you don't have a mindset of like, this is my only good idea I'll ever have, then you might not, you might be more willing to accept the risk involved in putting something out there and seeing what happens. So that's kind of my little couple minute diversion into IP and putting it out there, protecting it or not protecting it. But yes,
that's really well said. Really well said. And I think at the end of the day too, I mean, once you put out the Kickstarter campaign, like you said, there's still time after public disclosure where you can still, if it performs well and it's doing okay, then you're like, okay, well now we have a little bit of funding that came from the pre-orders. Let's invest in this this patent or whatever it might be to go forward with making sure that it's protected. Exactly,
and a lot of people do intend that. I've heard from a lot of people that, well, we're going to do a crowdfunding, and after that, we're going to use that money to pay for the patent. And that,
exactly.
That it's possible. There's the risk again that someone could beat you out ahead. And remember, it's a first to file situation. First person to file a patent application is the one that's entitled to it. So you're risking that. And then also, just in terms of doing the patent later, in the US, there is that 1 year rule, but in much of the world, it's called absolute novelty, which means if it's been public, it's too late. There is no 1 year grace period. US still has a 1 year grace period. And there's also the first to file situation going on. You just proving that you invented it first is not going to help. The idea of mailing it to yourself, it's not going to help. None of that will. But everything in business is a calculated risk. So understand what the risk is, and you decide what's appropriate for you, what risks you're willing to take, and what makes the most sense.
Exactly. And so I should note here that there's a really what we like to do as a part of our strategy, if there's something that's patentable about our products, and we recommend this to people that we work with as well, is to, if you can afford it, to go through with the patent. And even if it's a design patent, those are much cheaper than utility patents, as I'm sure you know. And this is actually really, really cool as a marketing angle to say that we have a patent pending product.
Yes.
So this actually becomes extremely marketable to point out that there's something unique about this that makes people more excited to want to support it and invest in it and pre-order. So that's a really cool aside.
Absolutely. Having it as patent pending is a great thing to have. And in a Kickstarter listing, you you go through the whole story of the product, and like as part of how, I mean, you're the expert on this, but just my impression is like you really build like the human story and the interest in the founders and how the idea came about, and part of that could be and adds credibility to the fact that you've gone and taken steps to protect it and that it's patent pending or something of that nature. So yeah, definitely is helpful. Hey, I mean, you want to just take a few minutes and maybe just go through kind of like the steps of how someone would jump into a crowdfunding situation?
Cool. Yeah, we can definitely do like the few minute overview.
Yeah.
This is probably like a much longer conversation.
Right.
But
And then I want to ask you about the program that you're launching.
Sure. Yeah, let's do that. So in general, gone are the days where you could just put up something on Kickstarter and it just somehow funds because of just not a lot of people are using the platform. So maybe like 10 years ago, like 12 years ago, Kickstarter was just becoming popular. People loved it and there weren't that many projects. So when you put up a project, even if it's like okay or acceptable, like there's chances that it'll just kind of pick up and just be successful and go viral just because. So back then people would somehow sometimes just put up projects on Kickstarter and they ended up doing well. So in 2022, that doesn't really happen anymore. So preparation is extremely important. So I'll break this down kind of as a high level, but in general, there's a pre-launch phase, during launch, and then post-launch. So pre-launch is just everything that it takes to get ready for the campaign. So most people are really concerned about things like the photo and video assets and the copy. Those things are, of course, really important because at the end of the day, that's what gets shown on the actual campaign page. Those are also happen to be the assets that you're going to be putting up on, for example, your Amazon product listing page or your Shopify store, wherever you're going to be selling it. So as a side note, preparing for a Kickstarter campaign is not any extra work or extra investment than launching on Amazon or launching on Shopify. It's actually, you're doing everything that you'd be doing to launch on those platforms, but you're just doing it with less risk without the inventory risk. So this is like a huge advantage. So your creative assets and everything that goes into the actual campaign page, that's what most people think about it when it comes to preparation. And we need to make sure we have those. But outside of that, what's really important nowadays, which is something that a lot of people overlook or they don't really consider, is using the pre-launch as an opportunity to build up your community and your audience. So that's going to be extremely important because at the end of the day, who's going to be purchasing on day one? What we recommend is that you really want to hit your campaign goal within the first 24 to 48 hours in general. And that's what allows you to start getting some momentum within the Kickstarter algorithm. So you can start ranking organically, so you can start getting more sales from people that are in the Kickstarter platform, or having Kickstarter feature you through emails and that type of thing, which is going to get you a lot of traction. So really, that's only going to happen if you start building your audience in advance and building your community in advance. So that's extremely important for us to prepare not only the campaign, which is the most obvious part that we need to make sure we prepare for, but to build up that community and build up that audience so that once day one comes and we're ready to launch, we have people that are ready to purchase. So that's pre-launch and pre-campaign.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the most important way to get in terms of getting started is to build the pre-launch, because you want to have a lot of attention. You want to have not just all the friends and family, but all of the other strangers that you've been able to get interested in your project to show up there on that first day or two, because that's what helps helps create additional visibility to bigger audiences, right? So like the performance you have in the first day or two is what gets you like to be like the toply promoted. I'm saying it wrong, but the ones that are actually promoted by Kickstarter, and the ones that kind of go viral, let's say, is all the ones that have that performance. So you want to stack that ahead of time in the pre-launch.
Exactly. So preparing for that is extremely important, and we want to make sure that that's we're at the point where we're comfortable with the community size and the community engagement and all that stuff that's happening before the launch, before we actually launch. Because if we are not there yet and we launch, we don't get a second chance at launching again. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just going along with that is like there's like other things that people do that run successful Kickstarters in terms of running ads, like running ads to drive traffic to the Kickstarter. And that's something that's not only important, but it's also it requires a good amount of knowledge and skill to know how to do that well, which is where something like the program you're creating comes in, right? So you're creating a program to really help people understand how to effectively run a Kickstarter. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So this program we're launching, and it's actually it's going through its iteration, and by the time you're listening to this, it's going to be top notch and good to go. But the program is called the Launch Accelerator Blueprint, so Lab for short. And this is essentially the system that we've developed launching our own projects. So we've launched a lot of really successful projects for our own brands, like you mentioned earlier in my intro. Thank you for that really awesome intro. But also we've worked with a lot of other campaigns and projects throughout our years of with crowdfunding as well. So we've kind of taken all this and we've condensed the process in this and the system, which we call Lab, to take anyone from product concept all the way to launching. And launching is not where it ends. This is important that once we launch, we're able to capitalize on building the brand, building that community, so that we can move on to other platforms and have a successful business and product, so that it has longevity. So really, the concept of this is that it takes you from idea concept all the way to launch, and then preparing your brand so that you could be successful in the long run. So that's the Lab program, and really what we're looking to do is we're looking to work with either people that are new. So if you're new, this is awesome, because if you're new, you might be limited on funds, or you want to look at a low risk way to launch your next product. This is perfect. If you're experienced and you've launched lots of products already, and Rich, you mentioned this earlier, people that are already successful that don't necessarily need crowdfunding as a way to get funding, but this is an opportunity for them to scale their brands, build an audience, and even validate some maybe more interesting projects that they want to launch that isn't like going straight immediately to, for example, like Amazon. This is an awesome opportunity for advanced sellers too. But for everyone, crowdfunding is amazing for cash flow and getting the pre-orders. So this is generally just generally like a superior strategy in terms of launching and then moving on to whatever platform of your choice based on your experience. So that's what the Lab program is about.
Oh, cool. And how do people find out about that?
Yeah, I can definitely check out our website. It's Live My Playground, so LIVE, my playground, as in the playground from outside, .com/innovations. And if you check it out using Rich's link, then we're going to be able to hook you up with a bit of a scholarship as well for the program.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And I love tracking links because, like I get to see, we get to have a conversation where you say, oh, a couple of my listeners are now like in my program. And that's awesome. I love to see that. So it's livemyplayground.com/innovations. Did I get that right?
Got it.
Okay, awesome. And in general, if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they go about doing so?
The best is actually through the website, livemyplayground.com. And get in touch with us there. We have a lot of free resources as well. So if you're just if you're curious about the idea, feel free to check out the website, and you can opt into some free resources that we send you, some videos and checklists and stuff for you to get going on how to think about pre-orders and how to consider like a different launch strategy. Because I know right now Amazon's really hot. People are talking about drop shipping and things like that. That's really hot, but not a lot of people are talking about crowdfunding. So we have a lot of resources to kind of get you started about thinking about what that could look like if you were to explore pre-launches, pre-orders as a way to, as an alternative kind of like interesting strategy to get started on e-commerce or to scale your e-commerce store depending on where you're at.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you coming here and to talk about crowdfunding and how to use it potentially to scale your e-commerce and as an alternate path. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. And I hope that everyone checks out the program, livemyplayground.com/innovations. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.